What's up, everybody? Hope you're all staying safe and in good spirits. I know that the world is kind of a crazy place right now, but we will come out of this in one piece, and until then I'm going to keep on putting out videos like the one today, which is going to be focused on how to get through the first 3 Hell Gates within Doom Eternal on Nightmare mode. That is the hardest difficulty within the game. For those of you that don't know, the Hell Gates within Doom Eternal act as some of the hardest challenges that you will encounter within the game, and they're set up in a way where they're challenging for when you encounter them within the game. So every time that you encounter a new one, it's going to be more difficult than the one previous to it. And the way I'm evaluating these will be with the tools that you'll have when you encounter these Hell Gates within the game the first time. No going to a later level in the game, getting all the bonuses and buffs to your character through there, and then coming back and doing that Hell Gate from a previous level. No, this is just going to be with all the tools that you have at that given time. The only exception to this will be the second Hell Gate, only because I found that the first time I recorded it, I failed to capture the audio for it. So I had to go back through, and you'll see that I have some tools from later stages in the game, but I do my best to not use them at all when I redo that Hell Gate. So if you see something that's a little off on the second one, don't worry about it, I promise I didn't cheat. First, I want to outline some general rules that you want to take into every Hell Gate encounter that you go through. The first of these being that you want to be constantly moving within these fights. Doom Eternal was created to be this kind of breakneck action shooter that requires you to be constantly on the move and keeping track of 100 different things happening on screen, and then reacting to them in the appropriate way, kind of like how you would play a chess game. And to that end, if you're not moving while you're going through these Hell Gates, don't expect to survive for very long at all. I'd say if you're staying in one area for more than 1 or 2 seconds, you're already putting yourself at risk for taking some major damage. And following that logic, if you're going to be constantly moving throughout these arenas, you're going to want a good sense for what the layout of the arena is. How many levels of verticality does every level have? Usually 3 from what I've seen so far. Where are all the health item pickups and the ammo pickups and the health pickups? These will all play a big part in helping you survive longer within the Hell Gates. My last bit of general advice is to use all the tools that you have available to you, because each and every one plays a really critical role to survivability and also just dominating these Hell Gates. And it's pretty easy to forget with the fast pace of this game that you have all of these tools available to you. So try and keep it top of mind to always have your abilities in rotation and in use. Don't let them sit. Now, I'm not the type of guy to usually dictate what your build should look like, but for this particular instance, because of how fast-paced this game is, I would 100% recommend grabbing the Chrono Strike rune. There's going to be times where you're going to want to slow down the pace of battle and give yourself a little breathing room to analyze the field, and this ability is perfect for that. Alright, let's jump into the Hell Gates. You'll find the first one in Exultia just before you enter the Chamber of the Betrayer. The fodder that you'll encounter within the first Hell Gate will be made up of primarily gargoyles and imps, both of which will come at you at numbers far greater than 20. In fact, they'll constitute the entire first stage of this Hell Gate battle. The heavies in this Hell Gate, which will start joining the gargoyles and imps, will consist of 3 revenants and 2 dread knights. Their appearance will mark the second phase of their fight, and their defeat along with the gargoyles and imps will mark the end of the fight. Now, when you come into this fight the first time, you're only going to be armed with 3 weapons and likely a very short ammo clip for each one of them. Luckily for you, the entire first fight is just made up of gargoyles and imps, and they're great for farming armor if you're able to get them together in a group, flame belch them, and throw a grenade right into the crowd. However, just because the first stage of this fight is just fodder enemies doesn't mean that you get to sleep on them. These guys, because of their large numbers, will very quickly overwhelm you, and they are all moving in on you always. So be constantly moving throughout the battlefield, even though you're just dealing with fodder here. And eventually, once you kill enough of these guys, you'll trigger the next stage of the fight, which will introduce 3 revenants and 2 dread knights. Now, if you're lucky and can kind of time the appearance of the revenants, you might be able to pull off what I did here and quickly shoot one down before it can even really get a chance to become a threat whatsoever. Otherwise, you're going to have to deal with all 5 of these heavies at the same time. Remember, of course, that the revenants have their weak points on their shoulder-mounted turrets. I find that usually having the micro-missile mod attached to the heavy cannon can usually make short work of a revenant if you can empty 2 to 3 full clips of that into them. Otherwise, the precision bolt mod on the heavy cannon are also great for sniping off those shoulder-mounted turrets, especially when you combine them with the Chrono Strike rune that I talked about earlier. Just jump up in the air, slow down time, and pop those things off. Now that's a little bit easier said than done because of course you're going to be constantly chased down by these Dread Knights, and unfortunately at this stage in the game you're not going to have the weapon that works well against these enemies. They're usually pretty susceptible to the chain gun, but your plasma rifle will do a pretty good job at being a substitute for the time being. Pair that together with your ice grenade, which you can just throw down whenever you see that one of these Dread Knights is close to you, and you can make pretty short work of them. Do all of this long enough, dodge and weave, use the fodder to your advantage, hit the weak points on the Revenants, and you'll get through this Hellgate in one piece. But of course the difficulty only goes up from here, so strap in. You can skip to this timestamp within the video if you want to see my full run of this Hellgate. You can find the second Hellgate within the Cultist base in the room with the giant crucified demon. As far as fodder goes for the second Hellgate, you'll have to deal with both soldiers and imps, and once again, these guys show up in vast quantities, easily more than 20 of each mob within the fight, and they're going to be persistent throughout the entire battle, so don't sleep on them. In the spirit of ramping up the difficulty, you're going to encounter far more heavies within this Hellgate. You're going to encounter mancubuses, cacodemons, arachnotrons, as well as 3 prowlers. So unlike the first Hellgate, the second Hellgate does start off with not just fodder enemies. There will also be 2 mancubuses that start off this fight. Now it's worth noting that when you start getting to the point where there's a lot of heavies within the battle, sometimes it makes sense to gather up 3 fuel tanks and use your chainsaw to just eliminate one out of the match entirely so that it's a bit easier to deal with. That's actually what I end up doing here to the second mancubus that I kill. Otherwise, I found that 4 shots from a rocket launcher will easily take down one of these mancubuses, and you can't forget about their weak points, which are those guns mounted to their arms. Now once you kill the first 2 mancubuses, after a short while a third one will burst through the wall, and at that point you should also expect the cacodemons to start pursuing you. Personally, I have a big issue with the cacodemons. I hate the amount of pressure that they put on me, so knowing that after I've killed the third mancubus that they're going to be coming in from off screen in the stage somewhere, it really becomes important to pull out your combat shotgun and prioritize getting a grenade in their mouth so you can stagger them and get the glory kills on them. Now after the cacodemons are gone, the arachnotrons and the prowlers will enter the fight. These will be the last heavies within the fight, but they're also potentially the most deadly because of their turrets. So your priority should shift to knocking the turrets off of the arachnotrons, and then pumping them with your super shotgun as much as you can. Get them out of the equation, and then you can focus on the prowlers, which, as long as you're moving, usually aren't that big of an issue. They'll spend most of their time teleporting as long as you're dashing throughout the stage. They'll have a hard time keeping up with you, so I would usually reserve dealing with them for last. And as soon as all those heavies are gone and all the fodder enemies are gone, you finish this Hellgate. Skip to this timestamp to see my full run of the second Hellgate. You can find the third Hellgate within the Super Gore Nest level, right outside the actual Gore Nest. The only fodder you have to deal with in this level will be soldiers. However, they will be accompanied by carcasses, which will actively put up shields to prevent you from hitting them. Some of the other heavies you'll have to deal with will include Hell Knights, Pinkies, and Prowlers, as well as a single Dread Knight. Despite the fact that this is the third Hellgate, I actually found it to be a little bit easier than the second one, just because the carcasses don't pose the same kind of threat that, say, a Mancubus might. So right off the bat, the first stage of this fight will just consist of the soldiers and the carcasses. The carcasses will actively try and put up shields around themselves and the soldiers, so just go for the carcasses directly and knock them out, get them out as quickly as possible. I counted that there's more than 5 here. I'm thinking there's around 6 or 7. Once you start disposing of them, you can focus on the soldiers as well, but at that point you'll also have to start dealing with some of the Hell Knights and other heavies that start showing up. I should mention that for the second Hellgate and all Hellgates that come after it, the Super Shotgun is actually a super useful tool, not just because of the punch that it packs, but its grappling hook actually lets you traverse between the verticality of these levels really well, which can sometimes be a game changer, especially if you find yourself trapped. Just grapple onto an enemy that's on a level above you and swing up to him. Now after you've dealt with the carcasses, you should start expecting the rest of the heavies to start slowly trickling in. First you'll have to deal with Hell Knights, and then shortly after them, Pinkies. After that, the Dread Knights, and then after that, the Prowlers. and it can very easily get to the point where you're actually dealing with all 4 classes of heavies at the same time. So what ultimately lets you survive this barrage of heavies is knowing specifically what their weak points are and what weapons are most effective against them. For example, the chain gun will be most effective against the Dread Knights and the Hell Knights. The Pinkies, obviously after they charge, you want to get behind them and shoot at that tail of theirs, which is their only exposed weak spot. Otherwise you're going to be throwing rockets into their faces and it's going to do little to phase them. And once again, the Prowlers are not that big of a threat. They're going to be struggling to keep up with you as long as you're moving throughout most of the level. Keep at it, clear everybody out, and you'll successfully get through the 3rd Hellgate. Check out this timestamp to see the full run of this Hellgate. That's going to do it for this first set of guides on the Hellgates. Remember that Hellgates 4, 5, and 6 will have their own video coming out in the near future. As always, if you found the video useful or entertaining in any way, please consider leaving a like and subscribing, and I will catch you guys on the next one. Take care.